Hi, everyone. Hoping that you all are well. Thank you for joining us for this discussion. This is a responsive discussion and also a discussion to provide clarification. We're going to be quickly addressing this purported birthright citizenship case. This is in response to another attorney, the Defiant Lawyers Network. And so there has been a provision of an analysis of this recent case, and I'm going to provide a different take on this particular case. And so many people are referring to this as a birthright citizenship case. That's not what this case is. This case is about remedies. It's about injunctive relief. And so therefore, it's not the birthright citizenship case that people might think that it is. That's not even what is on the table with respect to what the Supreme Court was looking into. And we're going to look very quickly at the specific issue that the Supreme Court was addressing, and we're going to look very quickly at the response. In order to review the original discussion for this response, you can go to this particular channel, and then this is the title up above for the original discussion. Now, this particular individual has offered that it is now easier to deport certain individuals or certain classes of individuals based upon what has been offered as a birthright citizenship case. However, the case that the Supreme Court just finished addressing is not a birthright citizenship case. Is it easier to deport people after this case? Quite frankly, no. If it was easy to deport people before, then it will be easy to deport people after. If it was difficult to deport people before, it will be difficult to deport people after. This case does not speak to this issue of birthright citizenship. And so we're going to get into what the case actually addresses. And so this discussion is in response to styling the case as a birthright citizenship case, and also this question of whether it is easier or not easier to deport certain groups of people. And so again, the case is talking about a particular issue, and birthright citizenship is not the issue, although that's the offering in the original discussion. And so that's what we're going to be addressing in our discussion. Before we get started, this is yet another reminder of why you need to read things for yourself. It's fine for people to analyze things and then give you their analysis, but in terms of your responsibility, it's your responsibility to look at the things for yourself. And so whether we're talking about scripture or whether we are talking about the law, it is important, when possible, for you to look at these things directly for yourself and for you to analyze things for yourself. And so this case is no exception. This is almost reminiscent of the Harvard case, where there were all of these interpretations of the Harvard case, but there was no reading of the Harvard case. And so with respect to this particular case, this Supreme Court case, this was really about remedies and about injunctive relief and about limits on the power of the district courts. And so that's what this was really about. What type of power does the district court have? And does it have universal power? The standard understanding of the federal district courts is that they don't have general universal power. They have very limited power. And that's what this case was clarifying. And so when you look at the language in the case, you see that the ruling does not authorize deportation of anyone related to the 14th Amendment or any other amendment. What it is doing is simply spelling out the standard jurisdiction of the 94 federal district courts. And this jurisdiction is already understood. But there have been challenges to this dynamic. There are lots of challenges going on with these courts right now, because there are all sorts of challenges to the Constitution itself. And so, what this case has done is that it has drawn a line in the sand, a clear line in the sand between the district level authority and the Supreme Court authority. And so, in order to have something that is universally applied in terms of the courts, that generally comes from the Supreme Court. And so, what's been happening is that the district courts, even if there were good intentions, they appear to be overstepping their authority in terms of who is under the ruling, who is going to be subject to the ruling. And so, with respect to the district courts, they have a jurisdiction, and it appears, based upon the facts, that the jurisdiction was extended in some of these decisions. And what the Supreme Court is basically saying is that that jurisdiction needs to be what it is spelled out based upon Congress. And so, what is the real authority of the 94 district courts? That's what the Supreme Court is spelling out. They are not addressing birthright citizenship in that particular case, even if it appears that this case broadened the authority for deportation. That's not what this case is about. The case is about injunctive relief and jurisdiction. And here you can see the style of the case. And it was decided on June 27th, 2025. And here you have spelled out the exact question that the Supreme Court was tasked with addressing. And so it's spelled out very clearly here in the court's opinion, and they offer: the issue before us is one of remedy, whether under the Judiciary Act of 1789, federal courts have equitable authority to issue universal injunctions. And so the question is about the power of the district courts. Do they have power to issue these universal injunctions? In other words, does a district court in Illinois have the authority to issue a universal injunction across the entire United States? Now, generally speaking, no. However, there seems to be some confusion about this. And again, part of this is growing out of the chaos that has been going on with respect to all of these challenges to the United States Constitution. And there have been many. And so there have been many instances of overstepping authority, not just with the federal district courts, but the executive branch of government. And so, again, it spells out very clearly here what the Supreme Court is taking up in terms of what they are entertaining. And that is all they are entertaining. And they say that very clearly. And so, no, they are not making a determination about whether or not homegrown individuals can or cannot be deported, or whether individuals have birthright citizenship. That's not the issue that's before the court. And so they are not addressing that here. Now, this case also indicates the applications do not raise, and thus the court does not address, the question of whether the executive order violates the Citizenship Clause or Nationality Act. And so they are spelling out very clearly, they are not addressing the constitutionality of that executive order. Instead, they indicate, the issue the court decides is whether, under the Judiciary Act of 1789, federal courts have equitable authority to issue universal injunctions. And so, again, they are not really looking at the 14th Amendment. They are not looking at birthright citizenship. That's not the actual issue that's before the court, even though the dynamics that led to all of this, those do have something to do with constitutionality. But with respect to this is all they are addressing. They are just addressing the jurisdiction of the federal district courts. And so just so that you know, there are 94 federal district courts, and those district courts sit inside of a circuit. And so if there is an appeal from the district court, it's appealed to the circuit. If there is a conflict between circuits, that's when things make their way to the United States Supreme Court so that a determination can be made for the entire nation. And so in many ways, it was appearing that the federal district courts were usurping the authority of the United States Supreme Court. And so it's no surprise that many of the justices decided to draw that line in the sand. And so here's the holding of the Supreme Court. This means this is the answer to the question of whether this universal authority is allowed. And so what the court indicates here is universal injunctions likely exceed the equitable authority that Congress has given to federal courts. The court grants the government's application for a partial stay of the injunctions entered below, but only to the extent that the injunctions are broader than necessary to provide complete relief to each plaintiff withstanding to sue. And so they even put limitations on the limitations. And so they are not in this ruling attempting to allow for deportation of citizens. They are not looking to usurp the 14th Amendment. That's not what this is about. They are simply drawing the line in the sand and creating boundaries for these types of decisions related to the federal district courts. That's all this is about. If there are other attorneys that see this in another light, and if you are listening, you are free to respond. However, this is my reading of this particular Supreme Court case. Remember, knowledge is power. Take care. See you soon.